Charlie, I love the reactions. Very good. Thumbs up. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining this session. Really excited to have you here. I like to have interactive sessions, so that's why I limited it to just 6 people. So you are free to interrupt with questions. We're going to do brief introductions here at the beginning, so don't be shy. If you are being shy or your camera's not working or you don't want to come off mic, you can drop in the chat what you're really interested in learning, like why you're here. I know Rachel already shared that, but I'm just thankful you're here and interested in this topic. And I'll tell you a little bit about me just to kick it off and break the ice, but then I would love to hear why you chose to come and spend your lunch or your midnight with me, okay? So my name is Allie, call me Allie, and I am by training and most of my life an epidemiologist. And no one knew what that was before the pandemic. It suddenly became very clear what it is I did, and it was actually interesting for a change. So I have the great privilege of working with large data sets and trying to understand health in populations. That's what I'm curious about. And most importantly, preventive health has always been my jam. I have always been really interested in what does it make sense to do to take care of our health and stay healthy. And when I worked in managed care, I was fascinated by who's coming in for preventive health services and who isn't. How can we do more to encourage people to really take agency over their health and do the things automatically, intrinsically, be motivated to come and do the things that really matter for their health? So I spent a good amount of my epi training figuring out barrier analysis. What are the barriers to doing good things for ourselves, and how can we reduce those barriers? And then I moved into working for Merck Vaccine Division, and had the great privilege of learning about vaccines and immunology just a bit. I got more into that during the pandemic. But I also got to see health delivery on the front lines by working with pediatricians and correctional facilities, and also military bases. So I traveled all over the Northeast. Then I got married. I became a military spouse, and Merck had trouble keeping up with all those moves. And then I decided to work for myself, and I moved into supporting academic researchers in moving their manuscripts out into academic journals. So I used my epi skills to help them by being somewhat of a proxy peer reviewer and doing the developmental edits and suggesting some, insights, maybe things that the reviewers might pick up on that would cause them to trip up and get annoyed. So maybe taking care of some of those things before it goes through the submission process. Did that for a long time, really enjoyed that, moved all over the world, including California and Washington, Hawaii, Japan most recently. And then moving back from Japan to Virginia Beach during the pandemic, during 2020, man, that was a wild time. And I immediately got to work trying to figure out if my boys would still be able to play ice hockey. So I got immediately immersed in the community, understanding this virus and how it was affecting people of all ages. Remember, I love populations. I love understanding how things affect us across the spectrum of populations, and decided that, you know what, it really looked like this was a virus that unfortunately was terrible for older people, but it was shaped like a hockey stick. The risk curve was a hockey stick, interestingly enough. And I used that knowledge and my curiosity to figure out a way to safely allow the young kids to keep playing hockey, because it is so important for their mental health, also for the families to keep moving as a unit, keep some kind of normalcy in their lives with the rhythm of going to practice and then coming home, but didn't want people at higher risk at home becoming exposed unnecessarily. So really worked hard to understand risk and where the risks were in a hockey rink, published a paper on that. So used, all of that outbreak investigation sort of skill to understand where the high risks were and how we could really reduce the risk, even in a closed facility like a hockey rink. So I had a great time with that, learning that we really could allow kids to continue playing, and then moved into, there's a vaccine coming out, the COVID vaccine. Is this really appropriate for young people? And what are the risks for it was then 12 and 15-year-olds? That then got me into vaccine safety research. So a new venture, and from there, immunology. And then from there, started moving into understanding the microbiome, because it seemed to me that the research was getting pretty well settled. It was time to take it seriously and really look into it. You may wonder why I'm here with ICF as a coach. We also had some challenges with school. So I have both kind of a health policy hat on with my master's in public health. I also have an education policy hat on, because I have neurodivergent folks in my family, and school was a major challenge for them. School was interesting. Yay, we have somebody joining us. 2 people. I knew this would happen. Okay. Come on in. I hope that you can join. We should have everybody now. Good afternoon, good afternoon. I'm Allie, and you'll have to watch the recording if you want the rest of my bio, because I won't bore anybody with going back over that, but I was just getting into why I'm here as a coach. I have neurodivergent folks in my family, highly profoundly gifted folks, and school was a huge challenge all along. It took a lot of close collaboration with principals and with teachers to make a hybrid kind of format actually work for my people. And by the time we moved back to Virginia Beach and the pandemic, everybody was in online school and there were masks on, there were just a lot of extra layers of challenge that came with school. I ended up becoming a coach because I realized that I was not showing up as my best self for my oldest son, who was 17 at the time. And the only person who could make any changes was me. I needed to look in the mirror and realize what I was doing to make his life more stressful and make our relationship extremely stressful. I was trying to project manage him through high school, and it just was not working. And a lot of my clients and the people I work with understand this just intuitively. When you have a very creative, divergent thinker and you're trying to kind of push them through a system that is not meant for that, it causes a lot of havoc and a lot of stress for the whole family. So I shifted into learning about coaching because it seemed to me that what I needed to do was be less of a control freak and really treat him the way I do raising and training horses. And that is, if you are on a horse with a lot of energy who doesn't really appreciate your strong direction, if you're holding the reins really tight, you're just going to create a bit of, how shall we say, eruption, and you might get bucked off because all that energy needs to go somewhere. So when you're riding a horse that is like that and really not happy with what you're doing, the strategy is give them their head, so you loosen the reins, but they have to go somewhere. All that energy has to go somewhere. So you give them a little bit of leg, which is counterintuitive. It's kind of not what you want to do in that moment, is to go faster, but really that allows them to release the energy, go where they need to go, and then you can come back to some sort of collaboration again. That is essentially the metaphor for coaching. And what I learned in that moment while I was on a bucking mare is this is what I need to do for my son. I realized that in that moment. And coaching is this is a beautiful metaphor for what coaching really is. So how many coaches do we have in the room? If you're not on camera, please come on camera if you can possibly do that. I see Pamela is, Angela is. So we have at least 2 coaches. I see Rachel probably is. Give me a thumbs up if you're a coach. Purvi, hello. And Charlene. Okay. So we have coaches in the room. So how closely would you say my metaphor of, releasing that energy and coming to a collaborative place kind of mirrors what you're doing with your clients? You're helping them discover what direction they want to go and begin allowing that natural intuitive energy to come out and take them in a direction finally and allow them to activate, right? So that is my background. That's why I'm here. And the reason I'm interested in the intersection between the microbiome and neurodivergence is I kept seeing those 2 things cross paths. And I needed to understand a little bit more about, is that chicken or the egg? Is it correlation? We know correlation is not causation, but what is actually going on? And I'm here today to hopefully just encourage some conversation about how we can, as coaches, drop a little bits of education into our sessions with our clients, just increasing awareness, right? Our job is to increase awareness and facilitate client growth. So how can we do that in a way that is just, little bits at a time that allow our folks to get curious about what could they do to actually improve their lives? And that restores agency, right? Anything that they can do themselves that gives them, constantly learning, right? And better questions. Anything that they can do themselves to take a step forward, even if it's a really small one, just starts triggering a daisy chain, right? Or a domino effect of increasing energy and the brain noticing, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's going to encourage me to do something else. So if we can add to our repertoire of tools, thought it would be pretty exciting. So that's why I'm here. What would you all really love to learn? If you could drop that in the chat, I would love to hear. And if one of you might want to come off mic and introduce yourself, this would be a great time. I'm going to give you opportunities as we go through. So one of you, I would love to hear why you're here.
I'll go because it's easier to say than to type. If that works.
Yay, that's awesome.
So I'm actually, even though I do coach, I'm actually here from a personal level, although I do based off of exactly what you just said, I can very much see how this would also fit into my coaching. But I'm going to say roughly somewhere between like 4 and 6 months ago, I really started to notice the difference in my kids, like behavior and attention to things. And they're young kids, they're 5 and 8, right? Mm-hmm. So just by making sure that they had like yogurt with active cultures in their nutrition, fruit and vegetables with every meal, and then really limiting processed foods. I mean, the things that I tell my clients all the time, but because kids seem to be picky eaters, like they had a little bit more freedom and flexibility. So because of that, and I saw this topic, that's really why I'm here, more like a personal perspective to just learn a little bit more, to see how I can even better support what's happening, just because it really is night and day difference for us at home, like being parents. And so any more information that I can take away to support that is like,
that's awesome, Pamela.
The thing that I'm like, let's see it.
That is so great. I'm so excited by this. I'm so glad you're excited. I actually, if I were going to have another child, I would consider naming that child Bifidus, just because it's so cool. Or maybe a pet would be better, right? Like maybe a dog. But I am so glad to hear that you've noticed a difference. What do you think, the pre and the post, what would you say is the biggest difference?
So I get like in this day and age, different from when I was a kid growing up, one of our kids is a big feelings kid. And so, I'm trying to still identify if that falls into neurodivergent or not, but, with this nutritional change, just the level of intensity of emotional response, he still has them, but they're not nearly as elevated, and they're not as strong. They're not as disruptive. And like, we're still managing, like trying to help him figure out what to do with all of that energy and like how is appropriate and maybe less appropriate. But that's the big thing. Like, we went from like volcanoes erupting every day, sometimes multiple times a day, to like, now we've got some like gurgling. And yeah, it's like the most important thing for me ever as a parent to understand better.
Wow, that's awesome. And kudos to you for getting curious, and for, I think you said your kids were roughly 6 and 8.
5 and 8, yep.
So, yeah, so getting into this and setting up lifetime patterns of eating is just really crucial. So kudos to you for that, and for everyone else here who is here because you're curious, either personally or to support your clients. So Pamela, thank you for sharing that. It's all, people love to hear stories, and will remember things probably more from you than what I'm about to share. So others, if you have examples or things that you would like to share, please jump in. I talk a million miles an hour. I apologize. I do have a handout I will send to you. Oh, great. Neurodivergent human here and neurodivergent clients. Great. So I will be sending you a handout. I have the email all queued up. And if anything comes up today in the chat or whatever that I don't answer, I will read that and then I'll put it in the email. So don't hesitate, okay, to drop something in the chat that you're dying to see. So the format of today is going to be this. We're going to start with foundations and then go into some evidence-based interventions. So it's a 3-parter, and then some strategies for coaches and clients, okay? And so I'm going to try to stop every 15 minutes and give time for questions. You don't have to wait. If you are also neurodivergent people like me and tend to blow up the chat while listening, that is fine. But if one of you could keep an eye on burning questions and make sure when I pause for questions that is, I see somebody has noticed themselves here. If one of you could just make sure that I don't miss a question, that would be super awesome. I'd appreciate it because it is a lot to juggle. So here we go. I was surprised to find out that there were actually 40 trillion microbes, and that's more than our roughly 30 trillion human cells. When I drink kombucha, I'm always like, oh, me and my 9 billion friends, and I'm not alone. And I love drinking kombucha. It gives me just a little bit more zest, which some people in my life wish I didn't have any more of. But I noticed, so the 9 billion friends, I was initially going to name this little presentation something about the 9 billion friends. Then I realized that that's actually not correct. It's 40 trillion. So then I thought it was pretty funny that not only are we not alone, but we're actually outnumbered by all of those microbes in our gut. And they are extremely important. And here's why. The gut and the brain are connected via an axis. And what happens in our gut supports the rest of our body. Our immune system, 70% of it is in the gut. When you eat your probiotic, Charlene, you get a little animated. I find that I speak more freely when I drink kombucha. It's kind of funny. I don't know if it's the 0.5% alcohol or what it is exactly, but so our gut and our brain is actually truly connected, and the immune system. So I had no idea when I started digging into the microbiome just how much was going on in the intestines. But if you think about it, everything is going in through our mouths and then going down through our, into the oral cavity and then down through our digestive tract. So if this lining, this mucosal lining, we have somebody else, come on in, Yulia. This mucosal lining is interfacing and interacting with the outside world all the time, right? So I thought about that during the pandemic. I was thinking, do masks really work or not? That is a topic for an entirely different call, not today. But if you think about putting a mask over your nose, you know that it's not blocking everything. What was powerful for me to realize is that my mucosal lining was actually doing the combat sport in terms of interacting with every single thing, whether it's food, whether it's something in my water, and whether it's something in the air. Say I'm going to a crowded place, I'm going to a concert, I'm going to church, whatever. I can actually trust my mucosal lining to be sorting out friend or foe for me. And that's true in the digestive tract too. There's a lot going on down there to sort this out. So it's really fascinating when we think about just how important it is to keep the diversity in our gut microbiome, because that ability to sort out friend or foe really rests on having the right population down there and healthy. And what we eat, as Pamela, you already pointed out, what we eat really dictates what kind of diversity there is down there and who is outnumbering who in the gut. So if we're eating processed food, for instance, then we are actually feeding, I hate to oversimplify, but I'm just going to start there. We're actually feeding the bad guys and not feeding the good guys, which means at a very superficial level, we are not allowing ourselves to feel satiated, because guess who hasn't eaten yet? The good guys. So the good microbes have not yet eaten if we're feeding the bad microbes food. And that means that we don't get satiety signals sent to the brain. That is why if I take just a spoonful of yogurt in the morning, or say I'm starving, or I don't want to have like a crash, for instance, before showing up here with you all. I wanted to have the right energy to show up with you all. If I ate turkey, right? If I had a deli sandwich with some carbs, I would probably have a crash and I would just feel really logy. But if I have yogurt like I did with flax and chia, then I have the right protein and just the right amount of energy to show up with you all. Now we'll get to tryptophan in the turkey. That's important. It's important because it's a precursor for serotonin and melatonin. And so it's an essential amino acid, which means we need to get it from dietary sources. We can't make it ourselves. But I'm not knocking tryptophan. It's just not what I needed when I was here showing up with you all. I wanted to have more energy so that I can handle all the questions that I'm sure I'm going to get. But if you are looking into wanting to optimize serotonin and melatonin for mood, right, then you're looking for turkey, chicken, eggs, cheese, milk, and yogurt, also soy and legumes. And then this last little grouping sounded like a smoothie in the making to me: oats, banana, dark chocolate. Sounds like a good smoothie. My children will tell you that my smoothies are gritty. They are not smooth. I did not realize that smoothie meant it should be smooth. Mine have all kinds of stuff in it. So flax and chia, and I even throw whole oats in there and grind it up. So it's more like a, I don't know, more like a pudding. I love them. But I have found that you can throw everything that your kids need into a blender and blend that baby up You don't even need ice because our ice maker is not working. So if you take frozen bananas and you put in some yogurt, you put in some oats, a little oat milk, maybe frozen blueberries, you can get all kinds of fruits pre-frozen in a bag, throw those in there. Man, you are really getting a lot of variety and color into a smoothie, and they might even eat it. So what I do with my boys is I have them, they're 17 and 20. I have them test the smoothie. I do not tell them what's in it. My husband is very bad about this. He will like, okay, what's in it before he tries it. My rule is no, I don't tell you. I release the ingredients once you give me your rating. So you give me like a 1 to 5, or actually it was a 1 to 10. I noticed that the more things I put in there, like when I started hitting the kale and peanut butter on top of everything else I told you, the rating started slipping from 9 to 8 to 7 to like 6.5. So I kind of found the sweet spot where the teenagers would tolerate what I was throwing in there. But I love it. I don't care. I'll have kale and chocolate all day long because I know it's good for me. And if I know it's good for me, then that's fine. You can throw ginger in there too if you need a little kick. So peanut butter, whatever you like. The worse your smoothie looks, the fewer other people will be trying to steal it from you. So I will not tell you what my smoothies tend to look like, but it's interesting that you can grind all this up and it tastes better than it would if you just ate it separately. So I digress. The reason all of these things that I just described that I throw in a smoothie are really important is a little something called short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acids. Who has heard of these before? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I knew Pamela had. Angela too? Okay. And wow, everybody knows about short chain fatty acids. Awesome. I don't need to spend a long time on this. Who knows why they're so important? Heard of it. Okay. I love it. I love the humor in this group. Okay. Short chain fatty acids they're like little carabiners, they're little links. And I was going to juggle all the technology to show you some mucosal lining cells, but I'm just not going to juggle with that. So imagine in your gut, right? It's a tube, and lining the tube are cells, and we want the cells to be like this, tight junctions, right? So we want them to all be tight. The short chain fatty acids keep the cells from popping apart. It keeps them bound up nice and tight. Okay, the good guys make the short chain fatty acids. So it's important to feed the good guys because that's what creates those short chain fatty acids, keeps the junctions tight. Why does that matter? Well, we don't want stuff slipping out between the cells and going into places that it doesn't belong, because then that triggers the immune system to go, hey, why are you over here on this side of the stomach lining? You don't belong here. Now I need to ramp up the immune system and go hunt down stuff that doesn't belong. Dial that out a bit, make that a chronic thing, and now you have some autoimmunity. Okay, so we don't want that. We want nice, tight cell junctions. And then it also supports the mucus lining on the inside of your intestines, right? So having a nice mucus layer protects those cells. But guess what it also does? I mentioned this on the way to dinner one time with my family. Somehow this always happens. I speak about things at inappropriate times related to the gut microbiome. So that mucus lining is not just on your cells, but it's also around the feces. So you get to have mucousy fecal pellets. And so often for our neurodivergent kids, unfortunately, gut dysbiosis, which means gut dysregulation, can make them constipated or have really loose stools. And I can tell you a number of families have mentioned that it's really challenging to have regular movements for the children. And that can even disrupt going to school. It can make the child anxious about going to school, having to sit for a long time on the toilet. So to be honest with you, that was one of the first things that really got me kind of curious about this interrelationship between neurodivergence and the gut microbiome. I just was kind of wondering if there was something there. And when I read about mucousy fecal pellets and the double layer of mucus, like around the feces and on the lining, I'm like, whew, that sounds like it would really slip things right out. And that might be very handy for supporting, regular movements and potentially reducing stress and stigma and embarrassment. So I will pause there and just see what questions are coming up or what thoughts folks have, if anything.
I guess why? Like, it's fascinating to me because I do know some people who seem neurodivergent, maybe undiagnosed, not sure, and have like the bathroom problem. Like, what is the actual link between neurodivergent? Is it chicken and the egg? Nobody knows right now still. Like if the gut affects and is participating in the cause of neurodivergency, or neurodivergence, it's just like a comorbidity or something?
To be honest with you, there is not a clear, biomechanical action that I am aware of yet that will correlate with a nice causal chain. What I perceive, having been in this area, working with highly and profoundly gifted folks and seeing it in my own family, and just being really radars open for evidence of this all around me, I think it has more to do with just stress in the household, to be honest with you. It is no easy feat raising people who are intense. I'm sure Pamela will attest to that. People who are intense. And then you add to that multiple kids, you might add to that, economic disadvantage and all of the stressors that come with that. You might have a dual income family. For us, we're a military family, so we're moving on top of that. And there's, high achieving, high performing parents who may not know they're neurodivergent. And then they have a child that is like challenging all of them, all of the structures and expectations, and really very little, like I'm 53. When I was younger, we were not talking neurodivergence. We were not talking, highly sensitive people. We're not talking about giftedness so much, and certainly not ADHD. That was just starting to really come to the forefront in the late 90s when I was in college, actually, and starting to get curious. So I think what we have going on is parents who were not necessarily raised steeped in neurodivergence, and we're just doing our best, and man, we're stressed out, don't necessarily understand what's going on. We are seeing some of the same things in our kids as we see in ourselves potentially. As we're raising children, we're revisiting our own childhoods, and we're understanding ourselves a little bit better. And what stress causes inflammation. Stress is not great for the body. And everything that I was just describing to you about tightening up those cell junctions is to reduce inflammation. And so if we have picky eaters, I mean, that's everywhere with neurodivergence, right? It's texture sensitivity and intense like sensations and things. Picky eating can drive a lot of problems. It can drive power struggles between parent and child. It can get us off the rails as far as appropriate and good food, and then that affects the digestive system. So to be honest with you, as far as, and this is just me, this is my own parenting style, I decided that it's okay to have one food dislike at a time, but we cannot rule out all food groups and all things such that we're left with only cheese and bread. That is not healthy. And that was just not what we were going to do. And I think through setting that early sort of power balance between the parent and child, where we're co-creating what we're going to eat, and we're not like saying no to everything, and I'm not being turned into a short order cook, set us up for, a way to talk about other decisions, whether it's exercise or whether it's snacks or homework and things like that. But I really, honestly, being an old mother now, I'm 53, I said, I really think that if we start very young and in a loving way, kind of set some boundaries and set up, that authoritative, not authoritarian parenting style. So right in the middle where we have boundaries, but we still have choice within those boundaries, we can provide our children with the awareness of what's appropriate for them, what is good eating, and also help them with the distress tolerance of trying things, which is frankly healthy for them from a mental health standpoint, is to be able to self-regulate and deal with the distress and uncertainty of, am I going to like this or not? So I think all of those tools are situated in that, age 1, 2, 3, believe it or not. And that's a totally different, parenting seminar that I have done. And I apologize for going off on that tangent, but I do think it's stress and picky eating, I would say, and reducing the dietary selection to a place where, we're setting ourselves up for not having good, you could see fecal pellets. It comes back to that. Thank you for that question. I'm sure if you were to ask someone else with more expertise than me, they would have more to add there, but that's just my own experience. The other things that affect the microbiome, you probably know this already, but it starts very, very early. So type of delivery, if you have a C-section delivery, the baby is not exposed to the vaginal microbiome. The baby is actually exposed to the hospital environment microbiome, and that changes how it's seeded. It's kind of like an algorithm, right? So depending on what you seeded, that's the direction it goes. Early antibiotic exposure, particularly before age 2. So we want to be really careful with that. Formula versus breast milk. And all of these things add up to potentially big shifts in the early microbiome, which tends to get set over those early years. It is harder to kind of adjust that track over time. You can do it, but those early steps that we take very early in a child's life really set them up for a microbiome difference later in life. We already talked about processed foods. I have some notes over here, so if you see me looking over, I just want to make sure I cover everything I promised to cover. The processed foods don't have the fiber, and that is really what's essential for the short chain fatty acids. So when I'm looking at foods, I'm looking for dietary fiber. That was kind of my big learning, is looking on cereal boxes for how much dietary fiber is there and how much protein is there, and kind of looking at those ratios compared to sugar. Yeah, so I'm going to pause there. That was basically the foundations of nutritional psychiatry that I wanted to share with you, that we'll now get into micronutrients and mental health. But any burning questions? Okay. So again, I am not an expert. This is just scratching the surface and highlighting some things that I thought were interesting, and then some practical changes that I've been making in my life and in my family's life to try to optimize. We're busy. I mentioned that we're a hockey family too. So if you have athletes in your families, it's really, really important that whatever you can get them to eat, let's make it be really high value. If you have kids who are picky eaters and low appetite, and potentially kids who have ADHD and they're on Ritalin or one of the other stimulant medications, that really reduces the appetite. So we have to be really sneaky about getting in the best possible stuff, because they are not going to want to eat as much. So in this section, I just wanted to mention a few things that have come across my radar. One of them is the ketogenic diet. Some folks that I know have tried that, and they say that it's really helping with mood. And if you listen to folks who are experts in nutritional psychiatry, such as the podcast Radically Genuine, is a great source of all kinds of interesting people talking about the intersection between diet and lifestyle factors and mood regulation. So Radically Genuine, you can find nutritional psychiatrists on there who talk about this, and the importance of the ketogenic diet, even for things like schizophrenia. So that is a really interesting rabbit hole you could go explore. It's high in fat, moderate in protein, and very low in carbs. And it originally was developed to manage epilepsy, but mood and focus are affected too. And it's because it stabilizes blood sugar and shifts the brain into a different blood sugar source than sugars. And so the brain begins to rely on ketones. The thinking there is it reduces neuroinflammation. I tried it for a day to see how much I would need to change my diet to get into ketosis, and it's a lot. You have to really reduce carbs. And I'm not sure that I can do that, but just even shifting moderately toward the keto side, I think is helpful. So again, it's not for everybody. It is really hard to do. You can start to get into the keto strips and checking your blood sugar, or not blood sugar, checking your blood ketones if you really want to see where you are, but it is like quite the endeavor. Let's shift into micronutrients now. The gut microbiome is really critical in digesting your food, mashing it all up, and extracting the micronutrients you need. So that is one of its really critical roles. Is if you think about, food goes in and stuff comes out, what's really happening in between? A lot. So iron is really crucial for dopamine production, and low iron in kids with ADHD has been linked to inattentiveness and irritability. So looking for foods that have iron in it. I remember when I was on an iron hunt, it's a different story. I won't share that here, but I looked at cream of wheat, actually had a decent amount of iron in it. I see Pamela nodding. So you want to be really clever about finding where you can source iron in the diet and get it in there. Any other good iron sources that you all are familiar with? Iron deficiency, yeah. Any woman our age should really look into iron deficiency. It is way more common than thought, and can really, on top of the menopause brain fog, can really make things challenging. Pill form, okay, yeah. I had to be careful, speaking of constipation, about when I took the iron pill. So I really tried to get it in food too. So thank you for sharing that. Zinc, another important micronutrient, that's important in modulating neurotransmitter activity and immune balance, and may also affect impulsivity. You can see zinc on cereal boxes and other like, nutritional labels, so keep an eye on that. Selenium is a powerful antioxidant, and that supports thyroid health. The thyroid is something that can be affected by the autoimmunity I described before, when those cells pop open and things leak out into the wrong place. So changing your diet can support thyroid health, which is really important, again, for women our age, with Hashimoto's and Graves being something to look into there. Magnesium, you may have heard of that, calming properties, and that helps really regulate GABA. And that is the brain's inhibitory neurotransmitter. So I was out riding horses this morning and I was really amped, and then I came home and I was really chill. And I'm like, gosh, I wonder what neurotransmitter that is. I am so calm and so peaceful after riding horses. It's GABA. So GABA. I'm like, well, that's trouble because I'm about to go talk to 6 people. I need to get back up. So we need to do some box breathing to regulate myself back up. So box breathing, I'll just throw in here is, who's familiar with that already? Okay, I see Rachel. So changing brain waves, this is helpful for folks who have neurodivergent kids, or yourselves if you need to ramp back up after having too much tryptophan. So box breathing is breathing in for 4 counts, holding 4 counts, exhaling 4 counts, holding 4 counts. And if you do that, you can change your brain waves and get yourself just enough focus to be really razor sharp, but not too much. Okay, the last one here, lithium, I've heard a lot about, and that can make a big difference for people. Somebody who talks about lithium quite a bit is James Greenblatt. He is quite the expert in nutritional psychiatry. I've attended a few of his webinars. He does have free webinars. So I don't know if you're like me, a webinar hound. Check out James Greenblatt, and I'll include that in the email too. But he's been talking about lithium as well. Any burning questions? I'm going to hit 2 others. Creatine and N-acetylcysteine. Have you all heard of either of those? I'm sure you've heard of creatine, more for bodybuilding, right? And NAC, N-acetylcysteine. Well, creatine is synthesized from the amino acids in the body. So our body makes it already. But I've been taking 5, is it 5 grams? I think it's 5 grams, not milligrams. That's kind of the lowest recommended daily dose. I throw that in the smoothie. I think it's made a difference. I really felt pretty sharp. I don't know if it was everything else that was going in that smoothie. I already told you were there 7 or 8 things, so that it's not a very good model, scientific model for me to figure out what was happening. But it is not going to be harmful. It's very safe. Please research it on your own and see if you're satisfied. But it is helpful. And most people have associated it with bodybuilding because it will help muscles hydrate. It'll pull in water into the muscles and support people who are working out. But it also plays a vital role in producing ATP. You know ATP from high school bio, right? It's the energy machine in your cells. So that's the molecule that's important in the brain and the muscles. So there are RCTs with some evidence for creatine reducing depressive symptoms. I just started to see that float around in the lay media, especially in females on SSRIs. So that might be something for you to check out. And it may be important for vegetarians who are not consuming as much meat. So it might help with cellular energetics for them. All right, I know I'm throwing a lot at you. N-acetylcysteine next. Okay, NAC, N-A-C. You can get this at your pharmacy, but it's not on the shelves. You have to go back into your pharmacy and ask for NAC. But you don't need a prescription. However, it is prescribed for some people. It does loosen mucus. So my dad has COPD, and I did some research to see if I thought that it would be helpful for him. He's trying it now. So he's only been trying it for about, 4 weeks. But there's a decent evidence base for NAC in that context. I got curious about NAC and mental health when I started to see that maybe there's some support for people who tend to ruminate. So there is an RCT looking at NAC and depressive symptoms. So again, it's well tolerated. It's a supplement form of the amino acid cysteine, and it's a precursor to glutathione, which is an antioxidant. I do not take this every day, although I know people who do. Huberman Lab, you probably know Huberman Lab. I believe he takes 600, I believe it's milligrams a day. So please be sure and check out his pods on that, okay, to learn more about it, because he does deep dives on various topics. And I think he is excellent. He's very evidence-based and very like middle of the road, and a really wonderful person to listen to if you're interested in deep dives on health topics. So moving into, I'm right on time here. Look at this. About to turn into section 3 for gut health strategies for coaches and clients. I'm going to pause here and take a breath and see what's coming up for you all. Let's scan the chat and see if there's questions.
I don't really have a question, but I think like one thing that I constantly think about, because my coaching is primarily in health and fitness, is like, you know, even myself hearing that now, it's like, wow, that's a lot of stuff, you know, and like, where do you prioritize? Like if you were to prioritize, because I don't take all of those things or a form of all of the nutrients you just mentioned, but I know that I take some. Do you think they have a hierarchy or no?
That's a good question. It is a lot of stuff. To be honest with you, my bias is low pharma. I really don't want to take anything, not even NSAIDs, you know, not Tylenol, not Advil. I want to learn to deal with pain by educating my brain about how it interprets pain. And I don't want to take a ton of vitamins. I don't want to be dependent on supplements. I want to eat well, because that's just really, it seems to me like, let's go to basics. Our body knows how to do this stuff. It knows how to make this stuff. My job is to give it the widest variety possible of things that I can. And so if I'm eating widely, it knows how to do all this. I think that once you start taking supplements, you start this like pyramid effect of, well, what about NAC plus creatine? What about NAC plus something else? And then, you know, we start to get into polypharmacy as multiple meds. That's trouble. I also wonder about multiple supplements. Could that be trouble? And they're expensive. So to be honest with you, I think the most important thing, if we're starting with our clients, right, is, are you getting fermented foods in? You know, are you getting yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut? What are some of the other ones that you like, Pamela? For
I mean, I pickle a lot of vegetables just because it can go with so many things and change flavors also, but we just do a lot of pickling. Not canned pickling, but like fresh, you know, fresh pickling, so that to make you know, to put it in salad and all the ones that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know anything about pickling. When I was in Japan, a friend of mine made kimchi, and that is really easy to do. I haven't done it since. You need a massive jar, you need cabbage, you need some, you know, pepper.
You just need a Ziploc bag. You don't need a
Ziploc bag.
Ziploc
bag. Okay. Yeah, so that's really important. Kimchi is great. And to be honest with you, if I'm starting to feel like a little bit, you know, run down or a little bit sick, I make sure I get some kimchi in, I get some yogurt in. Doesn't have to be a lot. And the other big change I made is the saltwater gargle. Made a big difference last year because that changes the pH in our nasal cavity. So nasal spray, a little saline spray, and a saltwater gargle. I know we're heading into summer and it's, you know, hopefully like pretty disease free. But often when people are in air conditioning and they're inside, we can see some viruses float around as well. Of course, hand hygiene is important for the fecal oral transmitted ones, right? But those are the major changes I made last year. And I have not been as sick during the hockey season as I was previously. Every year I would get sick. And this year I did the saltwater gargle when I fell off. And I wasn't sick all hockey season, which is crazy with the amount of travel and lack of sleep. What changes would you all make? Yulia, welcome. I know you're a health expert too, I think, judging by your email address. So what would you like to offer?
Just you know, very familiar. I'm from Russian culture. You know, a lot of this stuff it's coming from the culture. You know, it's I'm very glad it's coming to the United States too.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of stuff is just like, for us, it's very strange that people do differently in other countries.
It's very strange that we're just learning about this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
what
like,
do you eat in Russia?
It's like no connection to roots, you know. It's probably, I really don't know. It's, for me, everything is, I'm trying to digest the culture. Yeah, like in my family, it was from the very beginning, this, sour cabbage was on the table. It's, I never, it was never introduced to me as something special. It's just a staple,
Right.
Yeah, and the same with, yes, with using salt or using baking soda. Just like whenever you have a little bit sore throat, that's what you first use.
Yeah.
We go to doctor only with something serious.
Thank
But
you for sharing that, Yulia.
But here it's so much mixed up. Just yeah, it's. I don't really know. It feels like a lot of chaos. Just like in the common sense.
Right. Yeah. Common sense. Back to
So
basics.
that common connection to the common sense is lost.
It's almost like we need to justify now with science why common sense has always been common sense, but that's okay. That's fun. When I lived in Japan, do you all know what natto is?
I
Natto is
know.
another great. You know what it is, Yulia?
Yes, I don't.
It's another fantastic fermented food. And of course, that's a staple. When we were traveling around with the hockey families in Japan, that was always out. That was always a part of the breakfast. And the Japanese breakfast is amazing. It's protein, it's miso soup, it's natto, and other things that, I couldn't list right now off the top of my head, but just tremendous. I felt great on the Japanese breakfast because it's not carbs and cereal like we have, which is just really not all that healthy. So yeah, it's time for us to get back to incorporating, and it might be a challenge with kids. Pamela, how do your kids handle fermented? They like the pickles, it sounds like, probably.
They like pickles. That's about it though. My daughter's a little bit better at trying things than my son, who is the older one. The pickling is hard, but they will eat pickles. We've gotten them to try sweet red onions pickled. But I usually also am putting some sort of fruit juice in that to help it also. But I think that's okay for a 5-year-old and 8-year-old, I think.
It sounds like when we wrap this up, if you are all comfortable sharing your email addresses, it sounds like we need to get some of Pamela's recipes and some of Yulia's, recommended staple foods, if you would be willing to share. That would be great. So I'll bring us home here. This is the third section. This conversation is really dovetailing very nicely into just some common, good strategies for coaches and clients to use. So just going to see what I had in my notes that I wanted to be sure I mentioned to you. For me, I think the takeaway is gut diversity builds resilience. It gives our bodies the ability to make what we need internally, intrinsically, without relying on other stuff. Diet and lifestyle really shape our microbiome, and connecting our clients with their inner biology and their behaviors, like Pamela started us out with, just how it affects our mood and our volatility is fascinating. So maybe giving them some tools to notice things, to build some awareness around how they're feeling. Of course, as a scientist, I think, well, of course, what we're looking for, we're going to find. So if we tell them they're going to find changes and then we ask them to track things, we're setting them up to be biased toward finding the changes. But maybe that's not such a bad thing if we want people to do things that are self-sustaining and good for them. Maybe we can use that sort of confirmation bias in our favor, but I'm just throwing that out there. So the prebiotic foods, really, if you think of them, it's like fertilizer for the microbiome, fertilizer for the garden. They feed the good bacteria. Other good prebiotics include garlic and bananas, leeks, onions, and the oats I mentioned. The really colorful foods, including green tea, have polyphenols in them. I started adding green tea to my afternoon routine, or even black tea instead of coffee when I need a little pick-me-up in the afternoon. Fermented foods, we've talked about that a lot. So kefir, my kids like that. If you haven't tried kefir yet and you have picky kids, go for it, because they will drink blueberry and strawberry. Do not tell them it's something new. Just do not give them a choice. Do not give them an option. Here, we're doing this after school. This is awesome. Come and have like a little bit of this blueberry shake with me, and then we can think about homework. What else? Kimchi and sauerkraut, the pickling, those all have the life cultures that are important for your microbiome. And then let's talk about sleep. So this is really, really important. Sleep and circadian rhythm and your emotional regulation for ADHD, that is vital. So the beginning part of sleep is for memory consolidation. The early morning hours is for emotional regulation. So getting kids to bed in enough time to hit both of those phases, you know, that deep sleep and then the REM cycles, really, really critical for memory consolidation and skill building and emotional regulation. If they're having to wake up before they're really kind of done with that second part of the sleep cycle, then they're going off to school with a little bit less of the natural ability to self-regulate. So trying to creep that, you know, going to bed earlier. Movement, even walking, can really increase our microbiome diversity and regulate our mood. You all know that, I'm sure. Exercise is just phenomenal for promoting catecholamine release. Catecholamines are the same neurochemicals that are in the stimulants for ADHD meds, but how great that our body can make them and then roll us back down off of them. When you go on a stimulant medication for ADHD, some people say that when they come off it in the afternoon, they have kind of a lull, and it's really difficult for them to either go out and do things like sports or social things or ramp themselves back up for homework. So if we can build in the ability with our kids to boost those catecholamines again with exercise, I'm going to give you a little trick. Tabata is a 4-minute exercise. So Tabata is 20 seconds of doing something, anything, high knees, you know, jumping jacks, whatever, and then 10 seconds off. So 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. Repeat that 4 times. So you have 8 total cycles, 4 minutes, and you're going to get into a different headspace. Same with the box breathing. All of that will really change even the blood chemistry and give you a different mental experience without having to, you know, reach for sugar or reach for stimulants, and so much more healthy for us and for our kids. Nature, I am a huge fan of getting out into nature. Nature and movement together are just absolutely phenomenal for promoting creativity. When I work with clients, if I can, I love to go on walks with them. Even if they're remote, we're in different places. If we're both on the phone and I can get them out walking in nature, they will see the world in a different way. I don't have to be there. I don't have to see their face. You know, I can hear in their voice how they're doing. We can both look up at the sky and come up with, you know, maybe a different way of understanding a situation or a way to reframe. It also forces me as a coach to slow down and use silence. I will count the number of steps that I take and force myself to walk 5 steps with saying nothing. And if the client then speaks, I'm like, okay, 5 steps might not even be enough. Next time, try 7, because I can be, as you can tell, very energetic, very much want to help people, really committed to supporting people in shifting and having a perspective shift. But our clients need time to think. And I often am guilty of not leaving enough space. So going outside helps me do that, because I can study something in enough time for me to be like, study a leaf or something else. It'll give me something to do that is different than obsessing about how's my client doing. It'll force me as a coach to give them the room they need to really think. And then normalizing trial and error. We're going to make mistakes, you know, and we're going to, you know, have slip ups. We're going to have sugar. I love sugar. I love dessert, but it's just how much of it am I having, and can I treat myself well and not have quite as much? That's really everything that I had to share with you all. I would love to hear, we've got about 2 minutes. Any final questions or takeaways? What are you going to be taking away for yourself or for your clients from this? You can throw it in the chat or come off mic.
You know, thank you very much. I think it was very good. You know, and it is like what you eat, it's directly connected to psychiatry, really. Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, so like especially with kids, yeah, because I had this situation and we were experienced this American food on our kids.
Oh,
And really, like, we were not prepared how it all affected it. Like coming from another environment and just being busy parent, yeah, it learned very hard way that really like our environment was rough.
mm,
That something wrong with what's going on here, and they really wrong on every level, on the doctor's level, on every level, it's wrong. And it's like I was unprepared for that.
yeah, that's fascinating, Julia. You're right. We are in a very sort of, look to diagnose things and then look to prescribe things to fix things. And we're not stepping back and seeing the big picture as much as we could, going back to the basics, right?
Yeah. No, I saw that. Yeah. And it's, I had to go very hard way to do that. I'm saying it's a good experience. You are learning. Everything what happens to you, it's for learning.
That's a great place to end, Julia. I know that we're top of the hour and Charlene is
Yeah.
in Singapore and needs to get to sleep, but that's a really, really great point. And that's something that we know as coaches, right? As we go through difficult things and on the other side is growth and new awareness. And let's not spend any energy on, punishing ourselves or regret or resentment. Let's just focus on here's what we know now. Let's try something new and different and see how it goes. So thank you for that reminder, Julia. It's been a privilege to have you all with me. I really appreciate you signing up for this and joining. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and your evening, and stay in touch, okay? And I will send you the handout with the
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you,
yeah.
Allison.
Bye.
And
You're
just a logistical question. I think the answer is no, but is this a CCE accredited course for ICF? Where you
It's
get
not. It's
It's
not,
not.
but I would love to do that sometime. And I have done that. There is one that was 1.5, but I think you had to attend live last summer. So
Okay,
stay
great.
tuned.
Yeah, great idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.